welcome you to the session, Promoting a New Conservation Ethic Based on Respect for Indigenous Peoples. The purpose of the workshop is to contribute to recognizing the inherent responsibilities and guardianship Indigenous people have with respect to the earth, and acknowledging the need to recognize Indigenous ways of knowing and Indigenous rights, and to promote cross-cultural relationships and support joint priorities. My name is Peggy Smith, and I'm going to do just a short introduction following this, but I'd like to go over the structure of the workshop. You'll see that I will set the stage, which is more of a personal introduction. We're going to have presentations from Indigenous leaders from around the world. Victoria Talley-Corpus, Executive Director of Tatiba, John Chichu with the Inuit Katatami in Canada. Fred Cabello may come, but he was, his flight is today, so he said he was going to try and make it. We'll see if he shows up. Florina Lopez, Florina's not in the room yet either. She shows up. And Aro Hamid, who is Chair of the Commission on Environmental, Economic, and Social Policy. So after the presentations from the Indigenous representatives talking about their experiences with conservation organizations, we're going to review some of the mechanisms that are available to protect Indigenous people's rights. Janice Alcorn will provide an overview. And then we have presentations from Kristen Walker of Conservation International and Gina Cosentino with the Nature Conservancy, who will talk about how their conservation organizations are addressing these issues. And then we will have a half-hour discussion that will talk about moving forward. That part of the session will be facilitated by Juan Arce, and I'm sorry I forgot to mention, English on Channel 1, Spanish on Channel 2. So Juan Arce will act as a facilitator, and I'll step down because I have some very strong opinions about this issue, and I wouldn't be in a good position to facilitate. And then at the end, we will leave the final word for Tricia Kalanani Watson from Hawaii, on behalf, who's going to speak on behalf of the Youth Engagement and Intergenerational Partnerships. We thought it would be a good idea to have us leave this session with some words from youth who are going to carry forward any progress that we may be making in the future. Take your place, please. So, just a word about what brought me to this workshop. I'd like to thank my co-organizers, Janice Alcorn and Juanita Cabrera-Lopez. This is an official Commission for Environmental, Economic, and Social Policy event. And what brought me into IUCN was concern about what was going on in my part of the world, in northern Ontario, in the boreal forest. I'm of Cree ancestry, and in this circle part here, you can see this is where my ancestors came, out of the fur trade, with some of the fur trade folks coming over from Scotland. Okay. Oh, sorry. Coming over from Scotland and intermarrying with the Cree in this part of Ontario. This area is considered a homeland by the people of what we call Anishinaabe, who entered into a historic treaty with the Crown in Canada in between 1906 and 1930. What has happened in this boreal campaign is that the boreal has become a target for a fairly extensive and well-organized campaign by conservation organizations who, in our part of the world, set a target for 50% of the boreal, and then went on to lobby with our provincial government to bring in new legislation that enshrines that 50% target in legislation, and they did that without the input or consent of Indigenous peoples in this territory, an issue that I think is quite problematic. And the reason it's problematic is because the way the boreal, I'm not sure how many people are aware of the boreal campaign, but the way the boreal is painted, it is as some kind of terra nullius, empty land, language used like intact wilderness. But in fact, this is home. All of the communities except for two are Indigenous communities, and this is a homeland for those Indigenous communities who have lived there for millennia. And the fact that these decisions, conservation decisions, are being made without the consent of the people who live there is an issue that I would like to see addressed. And so that's what brings me as a facilitator and an organizer for this workshop. So, moving ahead, we will next invite Vicki. Talia Corpus from the Executive Director from Tiptiva to present on the Philippines.
Thank you very much, Peggy, and thank you very much for organizing this event. I'll just try to give a very brief presentation on what the situation is like and what's the context upon which we would like to really push for good conservation ethics. And I think we always start with the realities that we face as Indigenous peoples in relation to conservation projects, mainly those that are supported by the government. Okay, so it's just to talk about the state of conservation in the Philippines and the challenge of establishing new conservation ethics and a few recommendations related to this. So this is the part of the world where I come from. This is one of our communities where we are a rice-growing people, and we do have a lot of our rice production is water. It's rain-fed, so many of the water sources are really coming from forests. So we don't see a very dichotomized or fragmented relation between our agricultural systems and, of course, the ecosystem, the forest ecosystems that we live in. This is the Philippines. It's composed of 7,100 islands, and it's in the Asia Pacific. Sometimes it's in the Pacific, sometimes it's in Asia. I think we are in the best of both worlds, no? And this is a map that has been used done by the mappers in the Philippines, including the government, the official government mapping agency. And this is the picture of where the key biodiversity areas are found in the Philippines. Through a 7-year process, the main conservation organizations, including CI, World Wildlife Fund, etc., have worked towards establishing what are the key biodiversity areas in the country, and they have identified more than 100 of these. And these are the protected areas that have been declared by the government. As you can see, it doesn't cover all the key biodiversity areas. And these are, of course, the national parks that are established, the earlier slide. And these are the ancestral domains of Indigenous peoples. In the Philippines, we have an Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act that allows for the delineation of ancestral domains and ancestral lands. And so far as the work of the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples is concerned, these are the areas that they have identified as the ancestral domains. And that upper part, that blue part and the upper part is one. That's where we come from. That's where the Cordillera is. And these are our ancestral domains. So if you can see, this is the Cordillera, this middle part. This is where I come from, and it's one of the heavy forested areas yet in the country. But if you can see the protected areas, it doesn't cover the ancestral domains. It doesn't. Many of the protected areas actually don't have much forests or biodiversity for that matter. So these are the ancestral domains, and the violet ones are the protected areas. So you see that it doesn't coincide. And of course, these are the key biodiversity areas. So I guess, these are also the protected areas. And if you overlay the ancestral domains, the blue ones, you can see that in some cases they coincide, in a lot of cases they don't. But we have a series of these maps that shows all the other regions, but I just showed you the Cordillera region where I come from, because this goes to show that actually the best protected areas in the country, in our country, are actually ancestral domains. These are the ancestral territories of Indigenous peoples, and these are not the national parks or the conservation areas declared by the government. In in the same way, many of even this part, which is the key biodiversity area on the edge, many of these are ancestral domains of indigenous peoples as well. No? So that what we can conclude from this mapping exercise, you can see that in the Philippines, majority of the 130, I think, key biodiversity areas, majority of these are indigenous people's territories. And these are also the areas which have the most linguistic diversity and cultural diversity. So you can see that the areas where biodiversity is protected, the areas where there are still a lot of forests, are also the areas where, of course, there are indigenous peoples there who have long protected their communities and who have long, since time immemorial, spoken their languages. In communities where they don't speak anymore their indigenous languages, many of the biodiversity is lost, and also the forests have been heavily deforested. No? So, and it makes a lot of sense that that is how it is, because it means that if you speak your language, if you continue to speak your language, that means that you still maintain a lot of your traditional knowledge systems, and you still use your customary governance and management systems over your ecosystem. And that's why the confluence, the convergence of this is what's happening. You know? So what we are doing right now, one of the things we do is we are trying to implement the ecosystems approach. No? The government also has signed on to what they call the ecosystems approach under the CBD, but they never implemented it. No? And then they also have identified key biodiversity areas, but after that, nobody knows. Even the communities who are declared as key biodiversity areas, they don't know that they are key biodiversity areas. No? So what we are trying to do is to inform the communities that, of course, they are key biodiversity areas, but at the same time, to let them identify the diverse land uses in their communities, to show that the whole ecosystem is actually working in harmony, very consistently with each of the different pieces of the ecosystem, to be able to strengthen the traditional livelihoods of indigenous peoples, to strengthen their continuing control and management of these ecosystems, and to assert to government that these systems are the systems that work, and therefore they should not be undermined or denigrated. So this is just to show you that in this place, we have 3 forests. And there are different classifications of what forests are. There are forests which are for the birds, there are sacred forests, there are forests that are kept for protection areas, and there are forests which are determined for production areas. And then of course we have the rivers, the Wangwan, we have the rice terraces, and then we have the grazing lands, and of course the areas where we produce different things. And then in this place, they also have what they call the muyong. No, the muyong, these are like forest lands that each clan owns, that they protect very strongly, because these are the sources of water for the rice terraces. No? So this is the way it works in many of the communities in our region. And if you can see, of course, the thing that keeps this all together is the culture, the values, and the indigenous knowledge system. So we have the knowledge and practices, we have the belief systems and spirituality, we have designated areas which are sacred sites, ritual areas, and of course our cultural practices, which is very much underpinned by connectivity, values of reciprocity, mutual exchange. We have a lot of mutual labor exchange practices, and then of course we have customary laws. No? So this is the whole system that works, and of course our main thing in our region is to really continue defending our territories, lands, and resources, continuing asserting our traditional knowledge systems and our customary ecosystem management systems, and getting the governments to use this. In terms of how we use the key biodiversity areas, we also inform the people that they are key biodiversity areas, and therefore there are implications about this, that their lands cannot be mined, their lands cannot be logged, etc., because this is what a key biodiversity area should be. And therefore, they should use the efforts of government in terms of determining this to further strengthen their claims to their territories and also to their knowledge and cultures. So that is the community usually, that's the ili, no? We call it ili. So my last slide is just this one, that of course when we talk about conservation ethics, this should be really based on the following: respect. Basically, it's so simple really. It's respect for the rights of indigenous peoples, which are enshrined and embedded in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The respect for indigenous knowledge systems and customary ecosystem management systems. And of course, thirdly, ensuring the full and effective participation of indigenous peoples in designing, implementing, monitoring, and evaluating conservation areas. I want to stress very strongly this last part about monitoring and evaluation. We really strongly believe that if indigenous peoples are actively involved, and local communities for that matter are really very fully involved in monitoring processes, this is the way that we will be able to determine what should be done, what action should be taken, and also determine what kinds of policies should be pushed before the local governments up to the national governments. And the experiences that we have in monitoring are also very crucial in terms of bringing these recommendations up to the global level. We have done a community participatory mapping in communities and the indigenous peoples. In the particular community which we show the different land uses, they have developed 3D maps which the indigenous peoples themselves did. And this is the basis, this is the baseline data that they use to continuously monitor how the vitality of their biodiversity, the continuing use of their traditional knowledge, and also the strengthening of their customary laws, and the reform of these if they need to be reformed. One of the things that have been reformed very strongly is, of course, gender participation. Some of our customary laws don't necessarily provide for active participation of women, even if they're really the key actors in conservation and sustainable use. But because of the work that we have been doing, some of these have became more gender sensitive. So that's really what I want to share with you today. And this is not just something that we do in the Philippines. We also do work in 13 countries in different parts of the world, in Nepal, Indonesia, and Vietnam, and also in Brazil, Peru, Mexico, and Nicaragua, and in Kenya, Cameroon, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And the approach that we're taking is to implement the holistic approach, which is called the ecosystem approach, the human rights-based approach, the knowledge and culture-based approach, and all of these are underpinned by gender sensitivity and gender equality. Thank you very much.
Next we have John Chichu from the Inuit Tabaret Penatami in Canada, and Larry Carpenter.
Thank you for inviting us to this session. Establishment of conservation ethic. My name is John Chichu. I work for the Tabaret Penatami in Ottawa, Canada. I'm a policy advisor director for environment and wildlife issues with respect to the Inuit Canada. And my colleague here can introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Larry Carpenter. I'm an invalid from northwestern Canada. You see the island where the arrow is actually pointing at up there. That's where I am from. One of the most northern regions. I come from one of the more northerly communities in Sachs Harbor. My community actually has probably about 100 people living in it right now. People come in and go, but no more than about 20 or 30. That community there is on Banks Island, which is actually the fourth biggest island in Canada. So we've got a lot of room there. And we, as you can see, it's on an island. It's not on the mainland of Canada, so we actually have very little for any kind of infrastructure. We have houses, but in order to get there, you have to fly in, and that's the only way. And in order to get any kind of food, if you want to get, you can't just go to a shopping mall or whatever, you have to order stuff once a year, it comes in on a barge, otherwise you have to fly food in very expensively on planes, airplanes, and our planes are not like, they're not 737s or bigger than that, they're Twin Otters and little Pipers. So you can, that's what I'm sort of getting at. What I'm getting at is, it's because of where we live, we have no choice. We have to depend on what's around us, and we have species around us, and we're talking about ethics. Years ago, when my father was around, they saw things happening in our area. There was development for one, but there was also movements which went towards stopping, certain types of activities, harvesting activities, and we were always told at the time, it won't affect you guys because you guys still have your species that you could actually you could live off. No one's going to affect you, but it does affect